3 weeks later. Guinevere held the rough edges of the silver lockpicks between her fingers. She must have stared at the locked crate before her for hours, completely unsure of herself. Garrett had locked said crate, telling her that for her next lesson, she would need to use her picks to open it. The young woman gulped down a wad of bitter nerves. She could feel him behind her, smell his smoky musk all around her. His presence was making it difficult for her to concentrate, especially on a new and unknown task. Finally, Garrett intercepted.
"Do you need me to go over it again?"
he asked.
No, Garrett. That's okay. I'm just...
She mulled over her situation again. The darkened keyhole before her seemed to be watching her through an invisible eye, taunting her.
"You know, this early in your training, it's common for an apprentice to require assistance."
Garrett began again. He grunted as he squatted down, his chin now just above Guinevere's right ear. She gasped as his rough hands took up her silken digits. The thief traced her tiny hands, sliding his fingers into place until they covered each of her own. He began to press.
What are you doing?
She asked, intrigued.
"Just let them go limp."
Garrett murmured, his hot breath catching the nymph's earlobe. She shuddered, feeling as her pelvis locked up at the scent of the pheromones on his breath. Guinevere's body was no longer her own. Involuntarily, out of a deep-rooted lust, she began to relax. The thief's eyes flashed when he felt this change, and he began his instruction.
"You need to insert the straight tool here, and apply some pressure."
He demonstrated this using the tension wrench in her left hand. Guinevere's green eyes watched his demonstration, absorbing every visual into memory.
You do this in order to hold the pins in place. Next, you need to determine which way the cylinder must be turned to unlock the lock. I've commonly used this particular lock, so I already know which way you turn the key to open it. But I'm not going to tell you, Guinevere. That would ruin your training.
He smirked.
No fair!
She protested, returning the playful expression. Garrett chuckled softly.
In the event that you don't know, you can use the tension wrench to apply pressure to the cylinder, first clockwise and then counterclockwise. The cylinder will only turn a fraction of an inch before it stops. Try to feel the firmness of the stop. If you turn the cylinder the wrong way, the stop should feel very firm and stiff. If you turn it the right way, there should be a bit more give. The amount of pressure required will vary from lock to lock and from pin to pin, so this may require some trial and error. Start gently though.
I see.
Guinevere's eyes glistened.
Also, some locks, such as padlocks, will open regardless of which way the cylinder is turned.
Good to know.
Alright, I'm giving you your hands back now, Guinevere. Try to do it as I told you.
Guinevere scrunched up her face in concentration, her tongue poking past her lips a little as she began to work. Placing her right hand against the chest for support, she inserted and positioned the tensioned wrench. She turned it to the left slightly, feeling as the pressure intensified.
Nope.
She thought to herself, and tried the right. This time, the wrench turned the cylinder a bit further before the tension increased.
I think I found the right direction, Garrett,
she proclaimed. The thief's stoic eyes danced. Indeed, she had.
Do I take it out now?
You don't. Once all the pins inside the lock have been picked, the tension wrench will then be used to turn the cylinder and open the lock.
He explained. Guinevere nodded, watching as Garrett took control of her hands a second time.
You're right-handed, so you'll need to work the lock with this one. Makes it easier.
Okay.
You'll use the Betty here.
Garrett muttered, sticking the half-diamond pick into the keyhole.
To do most of the work. Once the pick is inside the keyhole, you should be able to press up and feel the individual pins with the tip. You should be able to push them up and feel them spring back down when you release the pressure. Try to push each one all the way up. Identify which one is the hardest to push up on. If they're all very easy to push up, then turn the tension wrench more to increase the pressure. If one won't go up at all, ease the tension until you can push it up. Later on in your training, I'll show you how to rake the pins instead. There are certain situations in which this may work better.
Garrett explained. He encouraged his apprentice's hands forward. Guinevere felt such excitement, watching as he worked fluidly through her. He had to press firmly against her fingers and the handle of the pick, which was a bit uncomfortable, but she didn't mind. The entire experience was too fascinating for her to mind.
Guinevere.
His voice almost caused her to jump. She had been paying more attention to his busy hands than to the actual lecture.
Yes?
She looked over her shoulder, brushing her small nose against his stubble-covered cheek. Garrett froze and looked down into her delicate facial features. Those supernatural pagan eyes were consuming him again, beckoning him. Slowly, he loosened his grip on her hand, letting both her extremity and the pick drop. The tool hit with a barely audible click against the wooden floorboards. Confused, Guinevere turned around to face her distracted mentor. His eyes were trembling, his mouth slightly agape.
Garrett? Are you alright?
Guinevere, what are you doing?
He began in a low whisper.
I'm sorry. You let my hands go, so I...
No.
The thief interrupted her.
No, not the lesson.
He stared at her, into her. Guinevere couldn't help but notice that his hazel left eye was riddled with deep emotion, more than she had ever seen in Garrett before. Instantly, she knew that something was wrong.
Garrett? What's happening?
I have no idea.
He stopped himself and shakily brought his large hand up to her cheek. He felt the supple skin, which resembled the down of a ripe peach. His apprentice slowly closed her marvelous eyes, content with his touch, releasing him from her gaze.
Guinevere, I have seldom found myself at another's mercy. I'm usually too quick to be captured. I can smell a trap from a mile away.
He receded his hand from her face. Guinevere recoiled slightly.
Are you under the misapprehension that I intend to trap you, Garrett?
Guinevere gasped. The thief shook his head, letting his gaze fall to the floor.
A wise man once told me that it takes skill to see one who does not wish to be seen. But you leave me wondering, Guinevere, how much skill does it indeed take to capture a heart that refuses to be loved?
Guinevere was dumbstruck. She trembled on her knees, completely at a loss as to how to reply. In all honesty, she didn't think that she could. Sensation and voice had left her person, rendering her temporarily mute. Instead, she just watched Garrett as the thief mulled over his own dilemma. She had never seen him so uncertain before, in the entirety of her apprenticeship. What had triggered this? Just a moment ago, Garrett was content in his lesson, and the young woman thought that she was doing well enough. But the way he looked now, so lost within the confines of his own world. It was as if there hadn't even been a lesson that evening.
I'm not really sure what you're trying to tell me,
She offered, finding her voice.
Neither am I.
Garrett spoke quietly.
This quandary, this development, is unlike anything that I have ever encountered before.
Garrett. Is it my fault?
I need to tell you something, Guinevere. You frighten me. I know that you love me, that you regard me with only the deepest levels of respect and devotion. But in spite of that,
He shot her a worried glare. He was terrified of ruining the precious connection he had with her. He wasn't the best with women. Yet another reason to avoid relationships. Anytime he was near a woman, it was always her jewelry that drew his eye, instead of the other, more common places. And the way he spoke to them differed very little from how he would address another man. He had no doubt that Guinevere had noticed this.
and how could she not? I haven't even told her that I love her.
The thief rubbed his temples. Why was she still here? Why was she so willing to forgive his flaws in an area which most women would consider rude or careless? What was it about him that the little nymph fancied so?
Guinevere, I know what you are, and I have seen firsthand what you are capable of with your magic. You have the power to sweep the city of life in one wave of your hand, should you accept your status as a goddess.
Is that why I frighten you?
Guinevere asked worriedly, her eyes wide. Tears began to form beneath her eyelids. She would never hurt Garrett. Didn't he know this?
No.
The thief stood. Guinevere followed suit.
Guinevere, I've never spoken to anyone nearly as much as I do you. I've never wanted to. I've never allowed anyone too close. I didn't think I needed anyone, wanted anyone.
His eyes met hers in an inferno of passionate splendor.
Until you, my Guinevere.
Garrett,
What frightens me is that you have consumed my thoughts. Your face never leaves my mind's eye, even when I'm asleep.
He paused again, his voice trembling.
Guinevere, I know that you care about me. I also know that you love me. I know that's why you broke the woodsy emerald. Why you refused to accept your status as a deity.
Guinevere was silent, watching him with her wild eyes.
If you truly want to be with me, I will not try to stop you. However,
He ran his arm down from her shoulder to her awaiting bosom. Guinevere gasped and looked deeply within his bicolored stare.
one day, you will be forced from my side, either by destiny or by choice. I want you to think about that long and hard, Guinevere. You cannot forego this power. As I told you when we first met, it's in you. Do you understand this?
yes. So long as I can be with you for a time, however short, it will be enough for me.
The nymph replied solemnly. Without even the slightest warning, the agile thief leapt upon her, pounding her into the floor. Guinevere allowed him to straddle her and locked eyes with her teacher. They were like an intense storm, intent on ravaging every corner of her body. She was the one forbidden treasure that he could never hope to abstain from. She lay there, her heart interlocked with his. These were special, silent moments. Moments in which her thief opened himself to her, and only her. Some part of Guinevere knew that he had never done this before, at least not like this. The way he held her, how he cradled her head in his hands. These notations of hers held deep meaning, although she would never figure them out until much later on. For the moment, Guinevere was just content to be with Garrett, to enjoy him in his entirety. The surreal hues of blue light were just beginning to come through the window of the clock tower, but Garrett was already awake and dressed. He exhaled a long sigh and crept quietly across the floor. He approached the stone window at the tower and looked down upon the city, just starting to stir with life. He had all but forgotten what morning was like. The way the sun cast its fire in a different direction, or the slight change in the hues of its flames. He watched as doves, not ravens, took flight from the scaffolding and disappeared into the waking world below. Their gentle cooing was strangely comforting to hear. From behind, Pilfer approached and nudged his leg. Garrett looked down at the little cat, who returned the gaze. Pilfer mewed sweetly, his eyes dilating into thin, crescent slits as the sunbeams hit his tiny face.
No, you can't eat them.
The thief scoffed at himself. The idea of talking to a cat seemed absurd. Thoughts of the other night began to weave their way into his mind.
Guinevere.
A flame of realization burned his chest. He knew that she was one treasure that he couldn't keep. Although she had blatantly refused to leave his side, Garrett knew that it was inevitable. He cared for her too much to allow her to remain. While he didn't know much about women, Garrett knew enough. He knew that they wanted stability. They wanted to fall in love. Marriage. Children. Forever. The thief released another sigh. Even if she wasn't a human woman, she was a woman nonetheless. Her urges and desires were still the same. Perhaps more than anyone, his apprentice wanted closure. To end her old life and burst open the doorway of a new and promising one. She wanted a future. And Garrett could never give her that.